Well, hello and welcome back to Midweek Mashup. Today I'm sitting down with Pastor Eric. We're going over the last couple weeks of our One Story series.
Yeah.
So we talked about Jesus
Yep.
a couple weeks ago, pretty important guy.
Yeah.
And then Paul this last week. So kind of similar topics a little bit, kind of introducing the gospel a little bit. What have we kind of been talking about the last couple weeks?
So last week we talked about this major turning point in the story of the Bible, which is God becomes flesh. And so John talks about Jesus in this way in John chapter 1 of in the beginning it was the Word, and the Word was God. And, you know, that whole famous story, it's, you know, the capital W Word of God is Jesus, and that he came to, you know, bring the light that gives life. And the light has shined in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And there's this very victorious speech at the beginning of John, only to set up the story throughout the rest of the gospel where, you know, Jesus is ultimately surrenders, so to speak, and is crucified and raises again. But the idea here is, you know, God had started with this family of Abraham, and through various you know, situations, types of leadership, exile, all sorts of craziness that happens throughout the story of the Bible. Abraham's family is kind of left waiting and wondering, like, what do we do? You know, like we're called for this purpose, we failed at this purpose, and now we're just kind of like, what happens next, right? And then Jesus comes on the scene as you know, the son of David, but also a son of Abraham, and comes to fulfill the work that Abraham's family is invited into, which is to bless the world by essentially introducing them to the God of Israel and who he is. And so Jesus does this. He you know, kind of lives in lockstep dependence on God the Father, and he heals, and he preaches the good news of the kingdom, and then ultimately, you know, goes to the cross, and because of that we have forgiveness of sins, and then raises from the dead. Because of that we have this promise of life, and it's just a really beautiful picture of what God is doing to reconcile everything to himself, and Jesus being the centerpiece of all of that. And so my big kind of thesis for that sermon was, this is how Jesus went about the work that God had called him to do, which is the work that is reconciling all things to God. So our work in sharing his missions should look a lot like his. And so that means selflessness and sacrificial service. It doesn't mean dominate or coerce or twist people's arms to follow the way of Jesus. It means we walk in the way of Jesus, and that blesses the people around us. And so the mission itself is faithfulness. You know, it's being faithful to walk in Jesus' footsteps faithfully, doing what he did in the ways that he did it. And then this week, you know, I kind of wanted to just underscore that when Paul talks about what is the gospel, he points to Jesus. And, you know, there was a number of passages we could have gone to, and you know, we'll do some of these other ones at a future Meg, but we chose to go with Colossians 1 because it reminds us of that very key biblical claim that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, meaning if we want to know what God is like, we look to Jesus. And this is the same thing John 1 said, you know, when we studied that last week. There's that no one has ever seen God except the Son, who has made God known. And so that's one of the central things that you'll hear me say all the time around here. And I know, you know, every preacher has their cliche things that people go, oh, there's a bingo card. You know what I mean? Like, he said that thing again, you know, and that's cool. But I think it's so important that we don't have to wonder what God is like, because he came in the flesh and he showed us what he's like, and then invites us to participate in that life. And so that's, you know, Paul's central claim there is that if we want to know what God is like, we look to Jesus. And then, you know, talking about the hope of resurrection, it calls him the firstborn among the dead, which I said on Sunday, it's like what that means is Jesus kicked down the locked door that kept people in death, right? in the grave. And that's what resurrection is. He kicked down that door, and now we are free to walk through that door into resurrection, to follow in his footsteps like that. And that's a beautiful piece of the gospel. In fact, like, we often want to talk about the gospel as, what happened on the cross, and that's certainly a part of it. But a huge, huge part of it is the resurrection. That it's the story used to be that you're dead and separate from God, and now the story is, even though we die, we will live, and that's powerful. So Paul is essentially telling people, hold on to that resurrection hope, don't lose heart, stay faithful, and keep pursuing Jesus. And then the last bit that we talked about is, it's like, well, he's the one we preach. We don't. So for me, that means we don't preach, political doctrine. We don't preach a formula for salvation. We don't preach anything but Jesus. We point people to Jesus. We look to him, and that's the message that we have. And if we could keep things simpler, I think we might represent him better than maybe we do sometimes. And so that's our calling as we share in this mission. We, 2 weeks ago, it was do things that Jesus did in the ways that he did them. Be like him. And then this week, it's tell people about him. And we show them and we tell them. We display it, we proclaim it. And so that's kind of where we're at in this journey through the mission of God in the Bible.
Well, we're going to be wrapping up the series here in just one more week. Pastor Will's going to give a good message on the church, and so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. But I did have one question about something that you said.
Okay.
You can't read the book of John without reading "In the beginning was the Word."
Yes.
And the Word is supposed to be Jesus.
Yes.
But without having like a higher education seminary degree, like what's the connection there? Like,
yeah. John is using this Greek concept of the logos, which is word, right? But logos is a bigger concept than just a word. It's like an order, something that holds things together, which is, in Colossians it says he holds it all together. Everything was created through him, and he holds it all together. He is the logic of the universe. He is, the other passages say he's the wisdom of God. And it's just a beautiful language to say, like, Jesus is the point of the story. He is at the center of it all. He's holding it all together. And this makes sense within the biblical understanding of how the world works. We'll talk a lot about this when we get to our Revelation series, which is going to be fun, because the logic of the Bible is God is a God of order, and he took the chaos and the disorder that existed before creation, and he made order out of it. So like when you're reading Genesis 1, it doesn't say like he created everything from scratch. It's just like the beginning materials are the abyss, right? The deep waters, which are a symbol of chaos in ancient Near East. And out of this abyss, this chaos, he makes order, some sort of order that allows life to thrive, right? So when John is talking about him as the Logos, or Paul is talking about him holding it all together, it's within that theme. It's telling the same story that's always been told, but saying, hey, Jesus, the one that came in the flesh, he was there. He was creating and holding and still holds it all together. It's really about elevating Jesus, and making sure that's the central message that we come to preach is Jesus. And so, it's a big claim, right? To say this random, kind of lower middle class laborer from Nazareth, 2,000 years ago, is the one who through whom all things were created and are held together, the logic of the universe. But that's the central claim of Christianity. Right. And so, and here's why I love, here's why that's such good news. When you read the Gospels, and you see who Jesus is and what he does, and the way he, the way he speaks for justice for the oppressed, the way he heals, the way that he the way that he sees how things should be, the order of it all, and how it's not that way. And so he goes about doing something about that, but also calling us to wake up. Like we've become comfortable in the chaos. We've made friends with the chaos instead of seeking to be in the grain of the created order. He wants us to wake up, to repent, to get back on the path that is participating in his good creation and in his life. And so when I read about Jesus, I can't help but be so grateful, that this is what God is like. When I read through the Gospels, it just gives me hope, because there's some days, I'm not going to lie, I listen to a lot of history podcasts, and human history has been a pretty big mess. Yeah. And then most of the history, we just repeat it, and it's happening in the news all over again. And you're like, this is sometimes really discouraging. And then I remember that, I remember who Jesus is. And not only is as he's someone whose footsteps we could all, I think, be inspired to walk in. I don't think you even have to be a follower of Jesus to recognize, whoa, this is a good path. He makes the claim that it is the path, but I think people could recognize, at least at the very minimum, that this is a good path, right? And that makes me just so grateful to know that not only is that a good path, it's also the one who's holding it all together. This is what he came to show us, and that always inspires me. When I'm feeling doubtful, because there's a lot of pretty big supernatural claims that we've got to accept if you want to be a follower of Jesus. And so sometimes as a big claim, do I really believe it? And then I look to Jesus and I say, if it's true, then this is the greatest story that's ever been told, and I want my whole life to be wrapped up in it, right? And it gives me that encouragement to keep going, because not only do I know whose footsteps I'm following in, I know where this all ends, and it's resurrection, it's new creation. He's not going to give up on his mission to reconcile all things to himself. He is going to accomplish it. And so, that's why I keep the faith, because John and Paul and other writers of the New Testament just point that spotlight on Jesus and say, this is the point of the story. And I'm like, cool, I'm in.
Thank you so much for sitting down and sharing a little bit more about the last couple of weeks. If you want to hear more from Pastor Eric on the incarnation of Jesus, I'll go ahead and add a banner there.
And if I'm wearing this jersey next week, that means my team is still in the playoffs, and I have to wear this every game day or they will lose. I don't make the rules, that's just how it is. So sorry if you just see me in this jersey for however many weeks the playoffs are.
I will be changing my shirts for the midweek mashup. And if you want to listen to or participate in a DBS on the passage from Colossians 1, I'll add a banner to that as well. So thank you so much for sitting down with us. And if you want to check out some more content, we have some more for you right here.